Wonderful. Well, can I ask, are there any Star Wars fans in the room? 1. 2? Are there any... there we go. Someone lays down the gauntlet and everyone's sort of reluctant. Okay, maybe. I love it. Well, look, I'll confess to you this morning, I am a Star Wars fan. Superheroes, Lord of the Rings, as I've already kind of alluded to, and Star Wars, they're my thing. I like them. And they're one of my favourite moments ever, although the film did divide the crowd, one of my favourite ever moments from Star Wars comes in the newest films. The first instalment of the newest films was called The Force Awakens. You remember this film? It was just a few years ago now. And my favourite moment in Star Wars comes in the first third of that film, where the new protagonists, if you like, the new heroes who are setting up the story for the next couple of films are introduced and their various stories are told. And then, about a third of the way through the movie, these guys end up meeting the great Han Solo. Any Harrison Ford fans in the room? Just a few. They meet Chewbacca and Han Solo, and as they meet them in this, as you can imagine, a particularly adventurous, precarious way, and then once that calms down, they're sat on the Millennium Falcon with them, and they're talking about different things and these myths. The younger generation talking about these myths that they had heard of the Jedi, of the Force, Darth Vader, the light side, the dark side, and Han Solo pipes up. The one who was cynical all the way through, if you remember the first couple of movies. And he said, yeah, as an old man now, as a seasoned man, he said, yeah, I used to think it was all a lot of mumbo-jumbo too. The Force, the light side, the dark, what a load of nonsense. And then he looks them in the eyes, this younger generation, he says, the thing is, it's true, all of it. It's true. All of it. Every time I watch that clip, I get goosebumps down my spine. Some of you are like, I have no idea why. But it's this moment, right, where I don't know why it gets me so much. Maybe it's the cynic turned believer that gets to something deep within me. Maybe it's the seasoned man who's seen something of life, seen something of pain and suffering, who is still able to say, it's true, all of it. And I hope this won't surprise you today, but the summary, the headline of this message on Easter Sunday, I say to you, is that it's true. All of it. What if this is true? What if this story that we rehearse every year liturgically, this one perhaps that we've known since we were primary school children, what if it's true? What if this all really happened? What if Jesus did indeed die for our sins and was raised for our justification? What if he is alive now by his Spirit and with us now? What if you and I were really made, formed, designed, engineered from our first breath to know God? And that we will always have a longing within us, an unfulfilled thing in the pit of our stomach until we come to follow him. Can I invite you this morning? Increase your belief, or at least suspend your disbelief for a few minutes. Because it is true. That's what I'm here to tell you. That's why I'm ordained. That's why I've decided to give my life to leading the church. That's my one message. It is true. All of it. And I say that as a personal testimony as well. As many of you know, I didn't grow up around the church. I didn't grow up around religion. And I found Jesus for myself when I was a teenager, that this message of the gospel was indeed good news. But it's worth asking again, isn't it, at the beginning of this sermon, why do we make such a big deal out of Easter? Why do Christians in particular make such a big deal out of Easter? A friend of mine, Rachel, did, as a part of her PhD, did a whole bunch of research on faith and mission and evangelism in England. And it was so reputable in academic circles that it got published and it got put out by the Archbishop's Commission. And you can search this for yourself. It's called talkingjesus.org, and it has all kinds of statistics about belief in England. And here's a few that might surprise you. 60% of adults in our country believe that Jesus was a real person who actually lived. Maybe that's not super surprising to you, I don't know. 1 in 5 adults believe that Jesus was God in human form. That might be a little bit more surprising to you. But you ready for this one? 43% of adults in England said that they believe in the literal resurrection of Jesus from the dead. 43%. Now, folks, I'll confess to you, there are not 43% of adults in England in church at the moment. That's a fact, isn't it? We aren't seeing that. And so it begs the question, why? Why, if so many people believe that Jesus was resurrected from the dead, that that's actually possible, in fact, that's something that might have actually happened, why don't we see more life within the church? I wonder if it's because of this. The question for a lot of people, I wonder, isn't, is the resurrection true? But what does the resurrection mean? What difference does the resurrection of Jesus make to my life, to the life of my friends, to those I love? How does it change my life when I'm in Aldi doing the shopping? How does it make a difference to my life when my kids are shouting when I'm trying to put them to bed? How does it change my life in the everyday monotony of my existence? And Christians for 2,000 years have given this answer. The reason that Easter matters, what the resurrection means, is that Jesus is in fact Lord and that he's alive. He's actually alive. Not alive just to the early disciples to appear to them in some kind of magic trick, but alive and at work and changing lives now, in 2022. You know, the good news of Easter is that the story isn't over. The story doesn't end at the cross on Good Friday, because if it did, the story is just that an innocent Jewish man got brutally murdered, and that was it. But the resurrection means that this man was indeed the Son of God. That his death was indeed a death for us. And that he is alive and at work today with us. This, by the way, the fact of the resurrection, is something that the early Christians held to so profoundly, held to so tightly that they were willing to die for it. You know, we know that people are willing to die for a cause, don't we? Many people in history have died for a cause. But the early Christians would die for a set of facts. They refused to renounce the facts that Jesus died, was buried, and rose again. They would stand in front of Roman emperors facing execution and refuse to renounce this fact. Because for them, the resurrection was everything, the turning point of all human history. You know, it's often said, historians note, I know we've got some historians in the room as well, so I do say this advisedly, but this is true. Historians from that time note that many of the early Christians, they would be brought in arenas before the emperor facing execution. And the custom at this time is that the emperor would give final words to those who were facing death. And usually one or two things would happen. The person that was brought before the emperor to die would either use it to launch one last outrageous abuse at the emperor. You know, stick it to the man. Or the second thing would happen, which is that people would fall on their knees and beg for their lives. But the early Christians, what were they recorded as doing? There in the arenas, before the emperor, facing death, they were given their chance to say one last thing. Did they throw abuse at the emperor? Did they beg for their lives? No. We have stories of Christians who simply stood there facing death, using their last words to pray for the emperor, to pray for his family. Is it possible that the resurrection of Jesus was so important to them, was so foundational to their life, that even in the face of their enemies, even in the face of death, they knew this was the most important thing anyone could ever encounter. Jesus was the most important person anyone could ever follow or meet. Many people die for a cause, few people die for a fact. And what God has done in Jesus, and this is really crucial, what God has done in resurrecting Jesus, he intends to do for all of us. Now, on a Sunday morning in Wilford, you might be thinking, what? This bloke's talking about resurrection from the dead. Yes, I am. This, by the way, is basic Christian orthodoxy. We just said it in communion. I don't know if you're paying attention to the words you said, right? This is basic Christian belief. St. Paul puts it like this: through one man, Adam, came death for all, came sin, came the propensity for people to turn their own way and turn away from God. And just in the same way, through one man, Jesus, comes life and freedom and forgiveness for all, everyone. Friends, the good news of the resurrection is that yes, you can know Jesus now, but it's also that death isn't the end. You don't need to be afraid this morning. All of us, you don't need to be scared of the abyss of death that we can so often live our lives kind of either ignoring or distracting ourselves from. Death isn't the end. You were made for eternity, and through Jesus you can know new life. You know, I think one of the great failures, and I said this to myself in COVID, wasn't that the church didn't do loads of good things. It was that we didn't state the bleeding obvious. In a moment, in a cultural moment, when everyone was faced with their mortality in a new way, when people who perhaps didn't often think about death were faced with their own death, we missed to say, friends, you don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be afraid. You can know life and freedom. This present darkness will pass away, but the kingdom of God will last forever. Death is not the end. The resurrection of Jesus, friends, isn't some distant reality for stained glass windows or for prayers during communion. Jesus is alive and wants to know us personally. He wants to bring resurrection life to you. Yes, resurrection life in the future, resurrection beyond death. But you know he's also powerful to move in your life now. He can bring life and freedom to you now. That's possible. You know, even as praying for this morning, I felt I needed to speak this over us as a community, that God can bring new life to you. If you're in here today and you're struggling with addiction, God can actually bring freedom to that addiction. He's not just a spiritual entity, he can actually change your life. If you're in here today and maybe you're struggling with a relationship, maybe you're struggling with your marriage, God can breathe new hope and life onto your relationship. I think of my friend Harley, right? So this was a guy who I knew from the church where I used to be a priest in the city centre of Nottingham. This was a guy who about a year ago walked into church for the first time ever. Big, burly guy, muscles bustling out of his t-shirt, right? Tattoos all over him. And he came in at his most broken. This was a man spending tens of thousands of pounds. He wouldn't mind me saying any of this, by the way. He said this publicly. This is a man who was spending tens of thousands of pounds every year on a cocaine addiction. And the only reason he walked into this old church building was because his Narcotics Anonymous group got moved and he wanted to check out the venue before he had to go in this midweek night. And he walked into this church. Friends, he didn't know his Bible. He didn't know any of the songs. He didn't know what the rules of this were. But he encountered the risen Jesus. God took hold of his heart in that church service. It's changed his life. It's literally broken and breaking the power of addiction over him. He's clean, he's sober. But more than that, he knows the freedom of a relationship with Jesus, the relationship he was made for. Perhaps no one put the significance of the resurrection better than this, C.S. Lewis in his 1947 book, Miracles. The New Testament writers speak as if Christ's achievement in rising from the dead was the first event of its kind in the whole history of the universe. He is the first fruits, the pioneer of life. He has forced open the door that has been locked since the death of the first man. He has met, fought, and beaten the king of death. Everything is different because he has done so. This is the beginning of the new creation. A new chapter in cosmic history has been opened. Don't you wish you could write like that? A new chapter in cosmic history has been opened. Jesus is alive, and he will make everything new. I speak it over you this morning. Speak over you this morning. The hope of the resurrection. Speak the life of Jesus over you. The freedom of Jesus over you. The joy of Jesus over you. Come in this building this morning at the end of your rope, clinging on to life by your fingernails. I proclaim that Jesus turns death into life. I proclaim it over you. I speak it over you today.